you, all of you, for being here, because it's my first talk in English. Then you're gonna be my like little mouses to make my experience about the Cristero War. As I usually say, if your Spanish is better than my English, I can speak in Spanish. Otherwise, just bear with me. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for the invitation, because I come from Argentina, so I will try to speak slowly so that I can be understood, because the Argentine accent can be quite strong sometimes, okay? My intention is to remind some of you and tell those who may not know about this historical episode, where now in the year 2026, God willing, it will be 100 years since that heroic event in our brother nation of Mexico, known as the Cristero War or the Cristero counterrevolution. Yeah. Now, one might ask, how is it possible that an Argentine comes to tell us about Mexican history? Because when I was young, I went for my very first time to Mexico, to Guadalajara. I was reading the life of Anacleto González Flores. He was a very known martyr in the Cristero War. And I was outside the Cathedral of Guadalajara. And when I was visiting the tomb of Anacleto González Flores, etc., I asked to a young guy who was outside the cathedral, okay, how are you doing? I was like 19 years old. He told me, how are you? I'm from Mexico. I'm from Argentina. Okay, how are you? What are you doing here? He told me. I'm just visiting the Cristero places, I told him. Mande? He told me. Oh. What is this? What is that? Okay. The Cristiana, the Cristero's war, you know. I have no idea, he told me. Then I thought to myself, this is maybe like he doesn't know, maybe he's I don't know, he's like, but after that, talking with people in Guadalajara was the center of the Cristero War, okay? It's the capital of Jalisco. Many people, even in Guadalajara, they didn't have an idea what the Cristero War was. Finally, I made my PhD in history about the Cristero. I used to be a lawyer before being a priest. I converted because the lawyers can't go in heaven, you know that, okay? No. And finally, I became a priest. But anyway, I made my studies about the Cristero. The truth is that many people don't know about this beautiful history of the church, because it's not just Mexican history, it's the church history, okay? In any case, the history of the Cristero War necessarily requires a historical framework in order to be properly understood. Mexico was once called the Pearl of Spain. It was the nation which, through the providential conquest of America by Spain, received the faith, the culture, the language, in short, the entire Catholic heritage. Mexico, I say, was truly the pearl of America. And when a South America says America, we think in all the continent, not like you think that America is just United States, okay? America is all the continent, from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego in South America, okay? Great. So much so that what we know called Mexico was formerly known as New Spain. The New Spain. New Spain was the first territory that the conquistadors and evangelizers came to know, visit, and conquer beginning around the year 1519 with Hernán Cortés, the great conqueror of the continent. Now, does anyone remember really when the conquest of Mexico began? It began in exactly in Mexico, 1519, yes, exactly, with Hernán Cortés. This providential man arrived at the coast of Veracruz. He set out from the island of Cuba. As you know, the conquest first began in the islands, with Christopher Columbus. And from Cuba, they departed with his troops and landed in Veracruz. There something quite striking happened. The vast majority of indigenous people who came to meet him didn't receive him as an invader, but rather as a liberator. This raises an immediate question. How can it be that we are received as liberators when we have come to conquer? It's important to remember that a large part of the American continent was uninhabited. In legal terms, it was considered like res nullius. Res nullius is like a land belonging to no one, okay? It's from Latin. Only about 5% of the territory from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego in South America was habitated. Yet even so, Cortés discovered that indigenous peoples welcomed him as a liberator. Why? We have all this stuff like this kind of ideologies pro-Indians people, etc. No? Now, because the imperial policy of the Aztec Empire involved regular human rights in order to provide sacrifices to what they considered their supreme deity, the sun. In fact, when one studies Mesoamerican history and discovers that the pre-conquest Mexico, dominated by the Aztec Empire, was devoted to the sun god, a false deity, an idol that had to be fed. And how was it fed? Not with herbs or animals, but with human blood. He wasn't vegan or vegetarian, okay? If you visit, for example, the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico, the city of Mexico, you can see the famous calendar stone is there, okay? Where the sun is depicted with its tongue extended, waiting to be fed. This was the reason why when Cortés arrived with only about 300 soldiers, many surrounding tribes allied with him against the Aztecs. Otherwise, one cannot explain how such a small force defeated an empire of millions, at least 2 or 3 millions of Aztecs. I laughed a lot really when all these tourist people from Mexico or from Argentina or from US go to Cancun, Chiapas, all these places, no? And they take like photos in these kind of pyramids, okay, in bikinis, etc. They don't know that the history was really cruel there. Then the truth is that no one wanted to be sacrificed. Unlike Egyptians' pyramids, which are tombs, the Aztec and Mayan pyramids were solid structures, truncated at the top. They were altars, altar for sacrifices. On these altars, year after year, human beings were sacrificed so that the sun might be rise again, nourished by blood. All of this is documented, not by Catholic priests, okay, but even by pro-indigenist authors today. They try to say, okay, it was their culture, you have to understand, they just wanted to kill people, it's very normal, okay? Okay, but the fact remains, the Aztecs were not pacifical people. They practiced human sacrifices. This explains why Cortés found allies among the neighboring peoples. However, he also faces another problem. He was a conqueror, not an evangelizer. Yet the Spanish crown had imposed a strict obligation: no conquest without evangelization. Thus, Cortés called from Cuba for the best and holiest Franciscan missionaries. These could later be known as the 12 Apostles of Mexico. And it is worth noting that when the Spanish arrived, writing didn't exist in the form we know it. There were no alphabetic systems, no wheel, no horses. Only, for example, regarding the culture, oral tradition and some pictographic symbols. Spain introduced writing enable the preservation of indigenous languages. There was also a lot of things, no schools, no universities. It was Spain who put all this stuff in Latin America, Hispanic America. And tragically, there were no immunities to European diseases, which led to devastating epidemics. This is a reason why many people, after the arrival of the white man, many Indians died. Not because the Spanish killed all the people, as usual lefty people says. They say, okay, they came here and they killed all the people, all the Indians. No, it was here in North America, because the mentality of Spain was a Catholic mentality. Here was a Protestant, Calvinist mentality, okay? But many Indians died because they hadn't this kind of immunity for their own health, okay? Then the natives saw Cortés with armor, ships, etc., almost as a divine person. So what did he do? He wanted to show them that these Franciscans, these very first missionary priests that they're coming from Cuba, they were really important. When the first Franciscan friar arrived, poor and worn, Cortés dismounted from his horse, knelt, and kissed the first friar's habit that he saw. The indigenous people were astonished. If this man, whom we thought a god, shows reverence to these poor men, then they must be even greater. And from that moment on, respect for the sacred and for men of God became deeply rooted in Mexican culture. However, evangelization didn't occur equally throughout Mexico. The center was deeply evangelized, the north less so, partly due to later settlement and proximity to Protestant United States. But the south also remained less evangelized, in part due to figures like Bartolomé de las Casas. He converted to the Catholic faith. Finally, as many times happens with these converts, they think that if they don't are really radicals in their lives, they can't go in heaven. Then he became like a priest from the Dominican friars, and he was sent to America, and he was sent to Chiapas. But Bartolomé de las Casas argued that the indigenous peoples should not be evangelized at all. At least like many priests, liberal priests today, they say, I think you have to show the Catholic faith. They can be good Buddhists, good Muslims, good whatever. You have to propose the faith. Never the church impose the faith. We propose the faith. St. Augustine says, no? The fides non ad imponenda, sed ad dissuadenda. We can't impose the faith. We can, how do you say, persuade. And he wrote a book about the destruction of the Indias, yes? And it was the beginning of the black legend against Spain. Do you know what was the black legend? Never? Yes, it's the typical anti-Catholic propaganda, not just against Spain. For example, when many people anti-Catholic, they talk about against the Inquisition, against the conquest of America, against the Galileo Galilei case, against the Middle Ages, like this was like a time of darkness. This black legend. It's a black legend. Okay, finally, Bartolomé de las Casas, he wrote many books against the conquest, and in fact, with these books, he became one of the originators of this black legend against Spain and the Catholic faith. And he even cooperated with Protestants in spreading calumnies against the church. Now, fast forward to the 19th century, we encountered Benito Juárez, president of indigenous origin, supported by Freemasonry. You can see there. It's not casual, okay? Maybe all of the presidents from Mexico until today, they belong to the Freemasonry. I think all of them. is very public in Mexico. It's not like hidden in the history of Mexico, okay? Mexico began introducing laws restricting public expression of religion. Religion was to be private, not public. In a country like Mexico, no, it wasn't United States, okay? You have to put in the mind of the Mexican people, okay? All the nation was Catholic. Okay, this president, Freemason, he introduced laws restricting public expression of religion. This led to early uprisings such as Religioneros, is like a precursor to Cristero War. Later came Porfirio Diaz, another Freemason, also Mason, but more pragmatic. He understood that attacking Catholicism in Mexico meant attacking the Mexican people themselves. Thus, his era brought relative peace for the church. By the early 20th century, tensions rose again. In 1914, a monument to the Sacred Heart of Jesus was erected on Cerro del Cubilete. It's like the center of Mexico there, no? Symbolizing Mexico's consecration to the Sacred Heart. Shortly thereafter, it was destroyed by the government in 1928. During these years, there was a new constitutional amendment in Querétaro in 1997. This is the head and the heart of Christ. Now, if you go to the Cubilete in Mexico, miraculously, the heart and the head remained intact. This is the new one monument. The last image was blown up by Calles. This is the current monument there. During these years, there was a new constitutional amendment, I said, in Querétaro. In 1917, three very important things happened. Communism, Russia. Second, Fatima in Portugal. If Russia doesn't is not converted or doesn't consecrate to my Immaculate Heart, all the mistakes, all the errors of Russia will spread all over the world. Do you remember that? Okay. And in Mexico, Constitution, the amendment of the Constitution. This famous Constitution introduced strict anti-religious laws. Religion, for example, was declared a private matter. Second, religious education was banned in schools. Almost all of the schools in Mexico were Catholics, not publics. But it was forbidden by the Constitution to teach religion in the Catholic schools. It's crazy. Religious vows were invalidated by the Constitution. Only civil matrimony or marriage was recognized. It was as if the ancient Aztec sorcerers had risen from their graves to legislate in Mexico, as can be read in this speech by one of the constituent deputies. Quote, "Gentlemen deputies, if robes are missing to hang tyrants, my hands will wave the entrails of friars. I will applaud from here, from my bench, anyone who insults priests here, for we all feel hatred toward the clergy. Yes, on this point, we are all in agreement, liberals and radicals alike. Yes, all of us, if we could, we would devour the priests." This was public, okay? In 1921, there was even an attempt to destroy the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe with a bomb hidden in flowers. The explosion destroyed the altar, but the image remained untouched. A crucifix nearby was bent, as if shielding her. It is still preserved today as the Christ of the bombing inside the Basilica in Guadalupe, the shrine, okay? All of this shows that even before the Cristero War was from 1926 to 1929, okay? But all of this shows that even before this Cristero War, persecution of the church in Mexico had already begun. And President Álvaro Obregón was the next one. Didn't dare to enforce through penal law what was already written in the Constitution of Querétaro regarding religious persecution. You know, all of our countries, we have like the Constitution, but after that, we need laws, penal laws, civil laws, I don't know if you say commerce laws, etc. Okay, like it's like different codes, códigos. Yeah, okay. Then one of these presidents should put in the practice the penal law against the religion, but because that was already written in the Constitution. But this guy, Álvaro Obregón, he didn't have the other things. Okay, okay, two things. Okay, again, okay. What he did attempt, however, was to weaken the Catholic Church by promoting the creation of so-called the Mexican National Church. Do you know that Mexico once had its own pope? Yes, believe it or not. Argentina had an Argentine pope. USA has a pope. And Mexico once had a Mexican pope during the presidency of Obregón. Then you have here Joaquin Perez, a rather unfortunate priest from the Archdiocese of Mexico, City of Mexico, whom the government offered a parish in downtown Mexico City if he would accept becoming the Patriarch of Mexico, Joaquin Perez, essentially the head of a schismatic church separated from Rome, obvious. Perez, a man already compromised, he had even joined Freemasonry in his youth, crazy, was recruited by the government along with 7 other priests who saw in this an opportunity for advancement within a parallel ecclesiastical structure. How long did this Mexican patriarch last? 3 months, just 3 months. Why? Because the Mexican people were simple but not foolish. They refused to attend their services, didn't bring their children for baptism, didn't go to confession. Within 3 months, the entire experiment collapsed. We now arrived at 1924 with the presidency of Plutarco Elias Calles, a harsh and deeply anti-Catholic figure, formerly governor of Sonora, openly aligned with Freemasonry. It's very known in the history of the Masonry of Mexico. Calles, it was a very known Freemason. Calles decided to enforce what had been written in the 1917 Constitution. He ordered the drafting of a penal law known as the Calles Law, with over 33 articles regulating every aspect of religious life in Mexico down to the smallest detail. For example, public expressions of faith were absolutely forbidden. Even wearing a rosary visibly could be considered a crime. Dressed as a priest with a cassock was absolutely forbidden because you were like showing your faith to the people. And your faith should be a private faith. And we're talking about Mexico, not like, I don't know, Mexico at the beginning of the century, okay, not Mexico now, okay? All the people were Catholic, even sinners as we are, usually, this is the original sin, okay? But they knew that they were Catholics. Church property passed under the state control. This is the Calles law. Religious vows were prohibited. Wearing clerical attire became a punishable offense. Foreign priests and religious were expelled from the country. Before the talk, we were talking about how many priests or nuns from US went to Mexico as a missionary priest or nuns. Now Mexico or South America are all the time like sending priests here or nuns to US. But at that time, many priests from America, from US, went to Mexico, like a missionary priest, okay, or nuns. The law also allowed the government to repurpose churches for any use it wished. The bishops, about 38 at that time, protested strongly, obvious. In some regions, such as Tabasco, absurd requirements were imposed. For example, to be a priest, one had to be over 40, married, and educated in the state schools. The government, the state, they wanted to put like different laws for the church. It was really crazy. The bishops declared the law obvious, unacceptable in a nation that was overwhelmingly Catholic and deeply devoted to Our Lady of Guadalupe. They encouraged, emphasizing that defending public life is primarily the role of laity and not the clergy. The protests began legally and peacefully. Petitions, legal appeals, signature campaigns in a country at that time, Mexico, of 15 million people, 2 million signatures were gathered in just 2 weeks without this kind of internet or WhatsApp or whatever, okay? Calles responded with a stark ultimatum: either the ballot box or the bullets. When peaceful means failed, resistance escalated to not violent civil disobedience. You know, in the doctrine of the church, even in the actual catechism, you have some positions to know against the government when the government is anti-Catholic, and you have to be against these kind of tyrants, you know. Okay, during the history of the Cristero War, all these means were absolutely Catholic. First of all, peaceful means, signatures, etc. After boycotts, this was like a boycott in Guadalajara. Women, they dress in black, they didn't want to buy meat, for example. They didn't want to use their cars. They didn't want to go to the cinema, all these stuff, okay? They made like a boycott, okay? Thus, the bishops made a dramatic decision. With approval of Pope Pius XI, they suspended all public worship starting August 1st, 1926. Why? Because the Calles law, the first day of the application was August 1st, 1926. This is a photo. It's not very common to see these photos, okay? Churches were left open, but without mass, without sacraments or clergy. Priests went underground without their cassocks. The night before, July 31, crowds flooded the churches, seeking confession, baptisms, matrimonies, knowing it might be their last opportunity. From the next day onward, altars bore a striking sign: God is not here. Churches were soon profanated, sacred objects stolen or sold, buildings used as stables, hospitals, even brothels, really. This deeply outraged the faithful, and thus began the Cristero uprising. The name Cristero, in fact, originally came from federal soldiers mocking the rebels who shouted, "Viva Cristo Rey!" Long live Christ the King. Among the leaders was one of them, Anacleto González Flores, this martyr I told you at the beginning of the talk, a layman, lawyer, and father who was later martyred but unbeatified. Before his execution, he told a frightened companion, one of the Vargas brothers wanted to confess. I need a priest, I'm gonna die. I need a priest, he asked to the murderers, okay? No, brother, said Anacleto González Flores. It is no longer time to confess, but to ask forgiveness and forgive. A father, not a judge, awaits you. Your own blood will purify you. And turning Anacleto to the executioner commanding the firing squad, he said, General, I forgive you from my heart. Very soon we will meet before the divine tribunal. The same judge who will judge me will be your judge. And then you will have in me an intercessor with God. You may kill me, but know that the cause will not die with me. Many are behind me, ready to defend it unto martyrdom. I go, but with the certainty that from heaven I will soon see the triumph of religion and my country. For the second time, let the Americas hear this holy cry: I die, But God doesn't die. Long live Christ the King. He said, for the second time this holy cry, recalling that in Quito, in Ecuador, as he was leaving the cathedral, these were the final words of Gabriel Garcia Moreno, the Catholic president of Ecuador, as he was assassinated by Freemasons in 1875. On the tomb of Blessed Anacleto González Flores, we can still read today the phrase, Vita verbo et sanguine docuit. It means, he taught by life, word, and blood. Lay people, men and women, defended churches, often unarmed at first. Public suppression of worship, a lot of clandestine masses, generations of Cristeros, boys. Today we are living now in San Francisco. It's a feminist city, okay? I have to talk about the girls, women. No, but this is real, it's history. No? Women played a crucial role through the St. John of Arc brigades, a secret network of about 25,000 women who smuggled weapons, gathered intelligence, supported fighters. Their organization was so secret that it was only discovered decades later. Okay, martyrdom was numerous, but let me show you some photos. For example, do you know the history of Father Francisco Vera? He was a priest. He was a hidden priest. Many of them were obvious under the clandestine life. He was almost to celebrate the Holy Mass. He was discovered in house. Soldiers came, took him. He was outside the house. He was almost to be killed. And he asked them the last desire. Please, give me just the desire. I would like to say fire, okay? Just fire. But I will say just in Latin these words. You know, all of you, I think you know the TLM. At the beginning of the Mass, the priest says, introibo ad altare Dei, okay? I will go up to the altar of God, you know, more or less, the translation. They say, prepare introibo ad altare Dei. Who took this photo? The government, because they published this kind of photos in the newspapers, because they thought that if they put this kind of photos on the newspapers, all the Catholics were being afraid. It was the opposite. All of them, when they saw this kind of photos, they wanted to go to fight, but they weren't like soldiers. This was a Cristiada, where people like you, civil people, normal people, they weren't like soldiers. They didn't know how to fight. But all their chapels, their churches, their temples were under attack. And you had to defend your faith. One of them was Father Francisco Vera. We have a lot of martyrs here, okay? Zenaida Llerenas, 16 years old. He made a clandestine oratory in her home. She was captured. Her beauty provoked from the first moment the low instincts of her jailers, who after stripping her, subjected her to harsh interrogation. The young girl pressed her lips tightly and said nothing. Your pride, said the general, is that you are a virgin, but if you persist in your silence, I will hand you over to the soldiers immediately. The soldiers mocked the proposal. The young girl whispered a prayer and raising her eyes to heaven said she would never betray her own. Then the officer, full of rage, shouted to his men, take her, she's yours. And the young girl perished at the hands of her executioners. After leaving her almost half dead, they threw her into a room. The young woman, violated by the troops, preferred to die rather than continue that way. I will pay the cartridge you used to kill me, she said to one of the executioners. But no justice for the enemy. After several days, without food or water, she died in starvation. She's not still a blessed. She's not still a saint. There is no woman beatified or canonized till today. Not today. There are a lot of nuns, lay women. Many such martyrs remain unrecognized officially. Okay, some photos. This is Francisco Orozco Jimenez. He was the Archbishop of Guadalajara. Just 3 of the bishops went with the people to the clandestine life. All the others went outside the country. Just 3 of them were with them, with the Cristeros, with the lay people, okay? All the generation of Cristeros, grandfather, he was still normal. He's still not today blessed. Florentino Álvarez, shoemaker of León, Guanajuato. The wife wanted to invite people to his funeral, and the curious for me was this holy card, okay? Long live Christ the King. Mr. Florentino Álvarez, my husband, okay? Originally from León, Guanajuato, died confessing Jesus Christ at the age of 37 on August 10th, 1927. His mother, wife, relatives, and friends, with immense joy, not like, I cry, my husband died. No. With immense joy, share this with you so that you may pray for the triumph of religion in Mexico, placing the soul of Florentino as a precious intercessor. Just that they weren't just martyrs, they knew that they were martyrs. Cristeros decapitated in Jalisco. If you don't study the history of Mexico, of the Cristiada, you're never gonna find these kind of photos, okay? In Jalisco, again, train station, several priests and Cristeros were hanged from the utility poles. The church grants plenary indulgence to anyone who dies crying, long live Christ the King, during the Cristero War. This is the reason why during the Cristero War and after, many Mexicans, and now today in all of Catholic America, we can say, or we say, Viva Cristo Rey, because it was the shout. The blessed, this is a priest, Miguel Agustin Pro, a Jesuit priest, who returned from Europe to serve clandestinely, arrested and falsely accused. He was executed by the firing squad. The life of Father Miguel Agustin Pro would well deserve another lecture, but let us mention only a few words about his final moments before death. Obvious, he was like a hidden priest, he was like smoking like a clown or whatever, okay? They're like a mechanic or whatever. He was living a clandestine life. No, he wasn't the liberal priest this time, okay? After being taken from prison, Detective Quintana approached Father Miguel Pro and whispered, "Father, forgive me. I'm gonna kill you. I had to kill you." With the greatest naturalness, the priest bowed his head as if confessing and replied, "Not only do I forgive you, brother, but I thank you." Then they asked him his last wish, to which he laconically responded, "To pray. I want to pray." He knelt, bowed his head, made the sign of the cross, and slowly kissed the small crucifix in one hand and the rosary in the other, and arose, shouting loudly, "Long live Christ the King! Viva Cristo Rey!" while a volley of muskets announced his triumphant entrance into heaven. But let us conclude. 3 winters passed, and the war would not cease. The Cristeros, despite being fewer in number, gained ground, which worried the government and also concerned the United States, which disapproved of the economic losses caused by the conflict. The conflict claimed around, more or less, 250,000 lives between 1926 and 1929. Then the banking firm of J.P. Morgan, through one of its partners, Dr. Dwight Morrow, ambassador to Mexico, began acting to reach a settlement between the two sides. Meanwhile, much of the ecclesiastical hierarchy, exiled in Rome or the United States, thought that if the war and suspension of worship continued, Mexico might end up forgotten by God and the sacraments. And so began the arrangements, if they could be called that. It was said that Rome wanted to reach an agreement at all costs, knowing full well that the government would never keep its word. It was like putting one's head in the mouth of a hungry lion. Among the voices, the most enlightened was that General Gorostieta, here, commander-in-chief of the Cristero forces, who declared in a memorable public letter, quote, "The bishops are not truly in a position to justly assert representation. Had they lived among the faithful, had they shared with their compatriots the constant threat of death merely for confessing their faith, had they faced the fate of their sheep as good shepherds, but it was not so. The tyrant's power would have crumbled if the bishops had agreed to declare just that the defense is lawful and, if necessary, obligatory. Let the bishops be patient. Do not despair. The day will come when we can proudly call them together with our priests to return among us to carry out their sacred mission, then indeed in a free country. An entire army of the dead compels us to act thus." Terrible words. But the arrangements were made. And what was meant to be a modus vivendi, a way of living together, became a modus moriendi, a way of dying. The Cristeros, pressured in their consciences by the requests of their bishops, surrendered their arms like sheep to the slaughter. And instead of sparing their lives as had been stipulated, they began to fall one after another into the hands of the executioners. Some claimed that more Cristeros died after the war than during it. This is not entirely true, but there was indeed, for over 20 years, a systematic extermination of all the Catholic leaders of the uprising. There was fulfilled the prophecy that the last commander-in-chief, after the death in combat of Gorostieta, could say, "Comrades, we must reverently obey the inexorable decrees of Providence. It is true, we have not completed the victory, but we Christians have a far richer inner satisfaction, the fulfillment of duty and offering to the Church and Christ the most precious of our sacrifices. Seeing our ideals shattered before the world, yet harboring, yes, by God's life, the supernatural conviction that our faith maintains and nourishes, that Christ, the King, will ultimately reign in Mexico. The National Guard disappears, the Cristero army, not defeated by our enemies, but truly abandoned by those who should first reap the fruits of their sacrifices and selflessness. Hail Christ, we who go to the humiliation, exile, perhaps inglorious death, victims of our enemies. With our most fervent love, we salute you and once again acclaim you King of our homeland. Long live Christ the King. Long live St. Mary of Guadalupe. Mexico, August 1929. God, Fatherland, and Freedom. Jesús Degollado Guizar, soldier of Christ the King. He was the last one, commander-in-chief. The terms of the arrangements were, first, the anti-religious laws would remain, not delete, remain, but not be enforced. Crazy, it was crazy, really crazy. Cristeros would lay down arms in exchange of safe conduct. And with a key condition, silence. Silence. For almost 50 years, the Cristero War would not be discussed publicly. Maybe they know because traditional family, you know. Today, the Americas look on in awe. They see courage of the Mexican people. They see their faith. They see their sacrifice. They weep with their history. They weep with their struggle. And yet, the rise in admiration and the love shown for Christ and his church. This is the Cristero counter-revolution, a story of faith that would not bend, a story of hearts that would not waver, a story of men and women who choose honor, duty, and God over fear, comfort, and life itself. It is a story silenced for decades, hidden from memory, yet it cries out to be remembered. It cries out to inspire. It cries out to remind us that faith, courage, and sacrifice are eternal. And now, to honor that sacrifice, we will end with the Mexican Cristero Corrido, a song of one of these warriors, one who preferred death to denying Christ. The title of this famous song is "They Will Execute Me on Tuesday."
El martes me fusilan a las 6 de la mañana por creer en Dios eterno y en la gran guadalupana. Me encontraron una estampa de Jesús en el sombrero. Por eso me sentenciaron, porque yo soy un cristero. Es por eso me fusilan el martes por la mañana. Matarán mi cuerpo inútil, pero nunca, nunca mi alma. Yo les digo a mis verdugos que quiero me crucifiquen, y una vez crucificado, entonces usen sus rifles. Adiós sierras de Jalisco, Michoacán y Guanajuato, donde combate al gobierno que siempre salió corriendo. Me agarraron de rodillas adorando a Jesucristo. Sabían que no había defensa en ese santo recinto. Soy labriego por herencia, jalisciense de naciencia. No tengo más Dios que Cristo, porque me dio la existencia. Con matarme no se acaba la creencia en Dios eterno. Muchos quedan en la lucha y otros que vienen haciendo. Es por eso me fusilan el martes por la mañana. ¡Pelotón! ¡Preparen! ¡Apunte! ¡Viva Cristo, Rey y Fuego!
Thank you. That's all. Si les gustó el video, aparte de suscribirse, activar la campanita y comentar, en la descripción de este video se van a encontrar con el link de la plataforma Patreon, un modo concreto de apoyar este apostolado que intenta hacer una contrarrevolución cultural y espiritual. Dios los bendiga y que no te la cuenten.